The most important factor in client-server communication is how well the server behaves. Typically speaking, it is often assumed that the client-server communication is, say, a browsing activity. So the first thing that comes to our mind is how good is the server that hosts these HTTP and web content, also called the HTML files. For that, we'd have to model a web server. In this module, we shall see what does a typical web server do, how can we characterize its performance. A web server is any server, but generally it is assumed to be HTTP server that hosts the content in the form of HTML files, and then we have clients. So the clients could either be using a browser to initiate request or any other custom app. So client sends the request and server responds them. So it is a step lock communication scenario. Specifically, web server has an operation that is determined by important issues. For example, a web server handles HTTP requests. It hosts HTML files. HTML, as you know, is a container file that gives references to certain other object files. Web server receives HTTP requests. It accesses the requested content on the server at which it is hosted. It creates a reply with the requested content as HTTP response message. Now, if we want to look at ways to determine the quantitative performance of a web server, we'll have to talk discretely about how much buffer the web server allocates to the requesting clients. What is the total number of clients that this web server can accommodate? What is the maximum file size that it can accommodate per client? How much time does it take in processing the request and servicing with a reply? And in case there is a loss, such as a frame or HTML content is lost, then how can it recover for that involving the timeout period? So these are the important factors which determine the overall goodness of a web server.